Justin Trudeau made a splash when he wore some Ramadan-themed socks at the Toronto gay parade, and this is also the time where Ramadan is kind of wrapping up. So he figures he would kill two birds with one stone by wearing some hilariously chic, multicolored Ramadan socks. So they are multicolored, which means they kind of go with the gay pride decor, which is the rainbow colors. These socks were also rainbow colored, and they say in Arabic, Eid Mubarak, which is marks the end of Ramadan. Now, Ramadan is a holiday in Islam, and it also coincides with the Ramadan Bombathon, which is over now because Ramadan is over. And in the name of Islam, there have been 174 attacks and 1,595 deaths during Ramadan in the war, also known as jihad, and that is the jihad is the war against non-believers and moderate Muslims to convert them all into a type of Sharia following bunch. Now, oddly enough, gay pride is not celebrated in Muslim countries. They tried to do one in Turkey, which is famously the most moderate of the Islamic countries, and in Istanbul, and it was canceled by authorities. So I think Trudeau, in wearing these socks, is trying to have his cake and eat it too. Liberalism is really a hierarchy of victim groups, and so Muslims are in there with gays, and he's trying to please both at the same time. But there is a natural clash, because in Sharia law, it says that gays should be murdered. I don't know if in the Quran it says how creatively they should be murdered, but ISIS is taken to throwing gays off bridges. In Saudi Arabia, gays are executed in the public square, and in Iran, they're hung from cranes. So, and this is all fine to the majority of gays that march in gay pride parades, because gay pride is also turning into a bit of a liberal parade and an anti-Trump parade, and instead of looking out for gay interests, which would be to, for instance, have a travel ban, because more people from Islamic countries means more Sharia law, which means more anti-gay thoughts, more anti-gay feelings, more anti-gay attacks. We've seen this in Amsterdam, where gays are not even comfortable going outside holding hands. Like before in Amsterdam used to be just this liberal mecca of hope and change, and now it's, if you go outside in Amsterdam with your partner and you're holding hands, you could get your ass kicked. Like if you were walking through the ghetto in Baltimore or something. It's gotten bad, and importing people from these countries that support Sharia law, that have Sharia law, which is every country in the Middle East, will increase the violence against gays. I mean, we've already seen it in Orlando, where 49 gay people were murdered in a jihadist attack during Ramadan, and over 50 were injured, and it took the police like 3 hours to take the guy down. So I have here an article in the New York Times. It says Dutch men hold hands in solidarity with attacked gay couple. So it's, let's see, it says and I'm quoting the New York Times, it says, from Amsterdam to New York, London to Havana, Dutchmen across the world held hands this week to show solidarity with a gay couple who say they were brutally beaten in Arnhem, the Netherlands. The outpouring of support came after the married couple, Jasper Verns Sureton and Ronnie Sureton Verns, said they were attacked by a gang of youths while holding hands on their way home from a party early Sunday. So, I don't know what's happening in the Netherlands, why the Dutch are all of a sudden so anti-gay, and they're beating up gays. So I'm looking down here. According to this statement, the Arnhem police posted on Facebook, the two said they had been attacked by men wielding bolt cutters. One had some of his teeth smashed out. Okay, so they're men and they're teenagers. Prosecutors said 5 teenage suspects would be charged on Thursday with serious bodily harm. Okay, the authorities are still investigating the motivation. Okay. Wow, so there's some mean-ass Dutch teenagers with some bolt cutters kicking the shit out of gay people. Amsterdam, the capital, has been a haven for sexual minorities for centuries and has marked itself as the gay capital of Europe. Okay, so I'm going through this article. I'm on the 7th paragraph. Okay. Let's see. The attack comes as the country has been grappling with growing anti-immigration sentiment. That's weird. I thought it was a bunch of Dutch teenagers with bolt cutters. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. They were Muslim immigrants, migrants or refugees. Now you notice that the refugee population is mostly men, and in the UK, they want a holiday in Syria, probably to take some of that welfare money back home to their family. So they had solidarity, lots of gay guys holding hands, and nobody seems to be addressing the problem, which is 2 million people from countries that religiously follow Sharia law. So there was a time in the West where the most natural political foe were Christians and fundamentalist Christians, but gays now have the right to marry. We have the right to marry. We have all rights that straight couples have. Now the most natural political foe would be migrants coming from Islamic countries who would wish to do harm to the gay population. So now in Amsterdam, which used to be a freewheeling place for sexual minorities, is now becoming extremely dangerous. I don't know how many headlines with gay people getting attacked before the political leadership will do something about the migrant crisis. Now, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, took issue to a Discover Canada booklet, which is a citizenship guide that said, Canada's openness and generosity do not extend to barbaric cultural practices that tolerate spousal abuse, honor killings, female genital mutilation, forced marriage, or other gender-based violence. Now, Trudeau took issue with this because he did not think that genital mutilation, honor killings, and gender-based violence should be described as barbaric. He felt that the Canadian Citizenship Guide should try to be a little bit more neutral. But how can you be neutral when you're talking about genital mutilation and gender-based violence, beating women? In Pakistan, they passed a law that is basically a guide to spousal abuse. I mean, these are things that cannot be tolerated in the West. And if you try to have a multiculturalist society, which means you bring people in from other cultures and you don't try to assimilate them at all into the broader culture, you're going to have huge clashes, and the tool will be violence and suicide bombing. And in America, we're occupying ourselves with whom will make whose cake. Will a Christian baker make a gay couple's cake? But if the Supreme Court rules in this matter, they're going to have to consider that. Are you going to force Muslims to make cake for gay couples, which is against their religion? Would you force Muslim to make a cake with Muhammad on it? I mean, these are the kind of questions that'll come up, and if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the gay couple in this case, what are the further ramifications? I mean, it could get pretty ugly with going to a devoutly religious Muslim's bakery and trying to get them to make a cake for a gay wedding, which would be a stunt. Similarly to this case, which was also a stunt, and also the pizzeria case was a stunt. As a news reporter went to a pizzeria in Indiana and asked them, would you cater a gay wedding? Now, it's unfair to Christians because they have, especially devout Christians, they have their beliefs, and you're just kind of knocking your head against the wall trying to get them to change their mind. But on the other hand, you have people that are coming into the country who actually want to kill us. So you have to ask yourself, what is the greater threat? Now, for those that don't know, the U.S. Supreme Court is hearing a case of a suburban Denver baker who refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple because the baker is saying it's against his Christian religion. It's a bakery called Masterpiece Cake Shop. So the state courts have ruled against the businessman, and the Supreme Court will decide whether the Colorado baker making the cake for a gay wedding would being forced to do that would violate his constitutionally protected Christian beliefs about marriage. All right, and so here I had my producer splice a clip. This is actually a local news report about the case. This is before it went to the Supreme Court.
Marriage. The wedding cakes at Masterpiece Cake Shop are detailed and attractive. The conflict between some customers and the owner has become ugly and complicated.
That we would close down the bakery before we would compromise our beliefs.
He says he doesn't believe in gay marriage and refused to make this marrying gay couple a wedding cake.
We've already been discriminated against there. We were already treated badly.
A judge ruled that a business owner cannot refuse service to a customer on the basis of sexual preference. And that decision was upheld today by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. The owner says he will now no longer make any wedding cakes.
What if somebody comes in and orders cupcakes for a gay birthday party?
If it's just a birthday, I have no problem with that. My issue is that I don't want to be forced to participate in a same-sex wedding.
This commission is also ordering the baker to submit quarterly reports on who he refuses to serve and how he retrains his employees to serve all customers.
At the moment, I'm just completely overwhelmed in emotions.
For David Mullins and Charlie Craig, today is a very sweet victory.
The next time a gay couple wanders in there asking for a wedding cake, they won't have the experience that we have.
So the question that I ask is, who is the most inconvenienced here? I mean, you have millions and millions of, or thousands and thousands of bakeries that will make a wedding cake for anybody because they're overpriced and they have a big profit margin. And this fellow believes in his heart of hearts against gay marriage, an antiquated belief, hopefully one that less and less people will have. But he's been forced to go against his conscience. Like, I mean, can you think of another group that maybe, what if, I was talking to Alex Danger, and Alex Danger said, well, what if somebody comes into your bakery and they want to say death to blacks, KKK rules, or something like that, or it's not even that, it's just a cake for a Klan rally, and you don't support that, and you don't believe what they believe, and you think it's offensive, and you don't want to be involved in any way with that. Or similarly, what if this guy had to make a cake for a mosque that was known to preach hatred? Maybe not in the United States, but there's actual cases of that in the United Kingdom, where there are mosques that are known to produce terrorists that have not been shut down. So now this baker, he can't make any wedding cakes at all, which was probably a huge part of his business, and he's been slandered in the press. So if you would, for a moment, I'd like you to consider the situation in Canada compared to the situation here with Donald Trump. In Canada, you've got a guy wearing Ramadan socks to a gay pride event. It's nothing to see here. There's no conflict between unrestrained migrations of Islamists and gay pride. And then in the United States, we have the Donald who's taken the travel ban of 7 Muslim countries to the Supreme Court. So he's won that case. The United States will now start banning people traveling from those countries. The Supreme Court put a caveat in it that if the people that are traveling here have a close relationship or family tie with somebody in the United States, they'll be allowed into the country. But otherwise, they'll be banned, which, I don't know, most of us who travel, they don't have experience with this, but I have had secondary screening. That process is a little stressful. So they'll probably have to go through secondary screening and give the customs officials all kinds of information about who they're going to see. I think that is fair, considering the level and hate for the West that come from those countries. Now, the Donald had an interview on Fox and Friends where he's talking about his healthcare bill, and he was asked about resistance to the bill by Elizabeth Warren, and I think this when she hears about this clip, she might have to poke her head out of her wigwam. Take a listen.
They want. How do you overcome that when someone like Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, literally says people are going to die because of President Trump's health care bill?
Well, I actually think she's a hopeless case. I call her Pocahontas, and that's an insult to Pocahontas. I actually think that she is just somebody that's got a lot of hatred, a lot of anger.
She's got a lot.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren is going to be doing some kind of war dance now when she hears about that the Donald is reviving the Pocahontas name, or he might not be, because it's an insult to Pocahontas. Now the left is coming out big league against this health care bill, ostensibly because it's a major part of Obama's legacy, and in an unprecedented way, Obama's coming out of the woodwork and attacking the current president, which is something that in the past presidents have not done. Presidents have not come out of retirement to attack the current president. It's something that is incredibly tacky. But of course, Obama's doing it, and largely he'll probably get a free pass. And Obama said, simply put, if there's a chance you might get sick, get old, or start a family, this bill will do you harm. And small tweaks over the course of the next couple of weeks, under the guise of making these bills easier to stomach, cannot change the fundamental meanness at the core of this legislation. Now, I don't think Obama read the bill. I think he just assumed what was in it and decided to say something about it, because this is at the core of his legacy. And if you see what Donald Trump is doing, Donald Trump is unraveling everything that Obama did. Just last week, Trump is rolling back the opening of of travel to Cuba, which was one of Obama's big legacy moves. JFK famously closed the borders, closed travel to Cuba, and Obama opened them up some 60 years later. So it is getting a little weird. In Germany, the German police on Tuesday raided the homes of 36 people accused of quote-unquote hateful postings over social media, including threats, coercion, and incitement of racism. Now, most of these people were right-wing, and only 2 were left-wing. And so basically, they're getting put in jail for expressing an opinion. Now, the Germans haven't done this since the Nazi days, and this is an extension of making certain opinions illegal in Europe. For instance, if you express a disdain for the importation of certain ideas of Islamic extremism, that kind of thing, into Germany, you could be put in jail. In Canada, you can be arrested for not using the correct gender pronouns, and the gender pronouns don't necessarily mean them or his or her. You can be compelled to use pronouns that don't even make any sense, made up pronouns. And if you do not use those pronouns, you have to face something called the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which is a kangaroo court outside of the normal Canadian justice system. So in Canada, There is no free speech, and as I said before, there's something called the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and they're actually trying to compel speech, that is, say what people can and can't say. And I have a clip about a bill. It's called Senate Bill C-16 on the Ontario. It's about the Ontario Human Rights Commission, compel pronouns, I guess, related to a person's identity.
Policy precedents already established by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. So when I looked on the website, I thought, well, there's broader issues at stake here, and I tried to outline some of those broader issues in the initial. You may or may not know, I made some videos criticizing.
And sorry, this is Jordan Peterson, who's a university professor and a psychologist, and somewhat of a YouTube star.
Bill C-16 and a number of its of the policies that surrounding it, and I think the most egregious elements of the policies are that it requires compelled speech. The Ontario Human Rights Commission explicitly states that refusing to refer to a person by their self-identified name and proper personal pronoun, which is the pronouns that I was objecting to, can be interpreted as harassment, and so that's explicitly defined in the relevant policies. So I think that's appalling, first of all, because there hasn't been a piece of legislation that requires Canadians to utter a particular form of address that has particular ideological implications before, and I think that it's a line that we shouldn't cross. Then I think that the definition of identity that's enshrined in the surrounding policies is ill-defined and poorly thought through, and also incorrect. It's incorrect in that identity is not and will never be something that people define subjectively, because your identity is something that you actually have to act out in the world as a set of procedural tools, which most people learn, and I'm being technical about this, between the ages of 2 and 4. It's a fundamental human reality. It's well recognized by the relevant, say, developmental psychological authorities. And so the idea that identity is something that you define purely subjectively is an idea without status as far as I'm concerned. I also think it's unbelievably dangerous for us to move towards representing a social constructionist view of identity in our legal system. The social constructionist view insists that human identity is nothing but a consequence of socialization, and there's an inordinate amount of scientific.
If you see this clip, it's Senate hearing on Bill C-16. I think he almost said bullshit there.
Evidence suggesting that happens to not be the case. And so the reason that this is being instantiated into law is because the people who are promoting that sort of perspective, or at least in part because the people who are promoting that sort of perspective know perfectly well that they've lost the battle completely on scientific grounds. It's implicit in the policies of the Ontario Human Rights Commission that sexual identity, biological sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual proclivity all vary independently, and that's simply not the case. It's not the case scientifically, it's not the case factually, and it's certainly not something that should be increasingly taught to people in high schools, elementary schools, and junior high schools, which it is, and it is being taught. I included this cartoon character that I find particularly reprehensible, aimed obviously at it as it is at children somewhere around the age of 7. It contains within it the implicit claims, as a consequence of its graphic mode of expression, that these elements of identity are first canonical and second independent, and neither of those happen to be the case. I think that the inclusion of gender expression in the bill is something extraordinarily peculiar, given that gender expression is not a group, and that, according to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, it deals with things as mundane as how behavior and outward appearance such as dress, hair, makeup, body language, and voice, which now, as far as I can tell, open people to charges of hate crime under Bill C-16 if they dare to criticize the manner of someone's dress, which seems to me to be an entirely voluntary issue. So I think that the Ontario Human Rights Commission's attitude towards vicarious liability is designed specifically to be punitive in that it makes employers responsible for harassment or discrimination, including the failure to use preferred pronouns. They have vicarious liability for that, whether or not they know it's happening, whether or not the harassment was, and whether or not the harassment was intended or unintended. And so I'll stop with that.
Thank you.
So, in Canada, you can be compelled to say something, or you can be compelled to call somebody by a preferred pronoun, and the pronouns aren't necessarily he, him, they, them. There's any kind of pronoun that they can choose. And in Germany, you can get put in jail for posts. Now, in the United States, it still seems like we have a degree of freedom, especially on the left. Actors like Johnny Depp can threaten the president's life, and it still seems to be allowed. So the effect on people, if you start arresting people for what they're posting, what they're saying, if you're skewing towards a certain ideologies, like if most of the arrests in Germany were right-leaning. So the effect on that, which is similar to what Obama did in with the IRS attacking groups that were more conservative and not allowing them to have a tax break, while we would allow groups on the other side to have a tax break, by actually targeting groups and citizens with the IRS. What it does is it shuts people down, and it shuts people up, which is extremely dangerous if you want a fair political system. And so any controversial things that you might say about millions of migrants coming into Germany, which is completely affecting their culture, it's causing people to become murdered in terrorist attacks. And most of the migrants are men of fighting age. They're not women and children. They're mostly men, and they're economic migrants. They're not fleeing oppression. They're there to get money so they can send it back, or so they're shopping for countries with the best welfare system so they can take the money and send it home, which is at least logical. But the danger is that we're also getting jihadists and jihadist sympathists. I want to thank you guys for listening to Jeff Danger Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Danger. Please feel free to email me at jeffdangerradio, and also email me if you want to be on my email list. Also, sometimes I post videos to my YouTube channel. It's Jeff Danger Radio. So I want to thank you guys for listening, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your week.